On Tuesday, the Patriots dialed back to a walkthrough pace, but we're going to break down the upcoming joint practice with the Washington Commanders. Let's do it. Welcome to the Patriots Training Campcast, everybody. I'm Mike Dussault, joined by Paul Perillo and Evan Lazar. And guys, today, the 11th practice of training camp, dialed back to a walkthrough. Seemed like they were really getting prepared for the Washington Commanders, who are going to come in here tomorrow for a nice set of joint practices. Always fun to watch. But, Paul, I think maybe the biggest thing that stood out to me, aside from some of the attendance stuff, is just getting ready for Jaden Daniels and that offense.
Yeah, and listening to Jabril Peppers talk about it a little bit, it's a good test for them. It's a guy that was obviously pretty dynamic as a rookie last year. Peppers talked about wanting to make sure that the discipline, the eyes were in the right place. They want to make sure they maintain their containment on the outside. So I do think it'll be a nice little test for the defense. They will see a handful of mobile guys, and obviously Daniels is as electric as any of them.
Yeah. Anything stand out to you today?
Well, it would just be interesting to see if some of the carryover, the reps that we saw in today's practice with, Marcus Bryant still mixing in, Javon Baker mixing in a little bit, and do those guys start to get opportunities with Drake Maye and with the top offense? We'll see, because day like tomorrow is a day that Javon Baker could make the team, theoretically, if he has a great day against the Commanders, and Lattimore and Sanders still in a good cornerback room in Washington. So I'm just interested to see if that was like kind of setting the table for giving those guys some of those opportunities tomorrow to maybe make a push that we've already seen a little bit here.
Yeah, I want to set the table a little bit for joint practices, but first let's just talk a little about the attendance. Two guys who left practice yesterday, Marcellus Dial as well as Jaquelin Roy, were not out there today. We did see Carlton Davis, who continues his pattern of showing up for walkthroughs, light participant. Wouldn't anticipate to see him either tomorrow or Friday night still. But overall, it seems like some of the depth on the offensive line, that's where I'm most interested, guys. Sidy So's been out for a little while. Caden Wallace has been out for a little while. They've had to sign they brought in Alec Lindstrom at center as well. How much is Will Campbell going to play? I'm not expecting to see a lot of Morgan Moses, but when I look at these tackle positions, we've seen, like you said, have more of Marcus Bryant in recent days. Trey Jacobs has continued to work in with that unit. Those are two guys I'm just going to start with. On the outside, Bryant and Jacobs as two tackles who opportunity for a swing tackle position, but also very valuable depth. And you can tell through training camp the Patriots have kind of been building towards having that depth by getting them reps early on.
Yeah, I think the right tackle spot is interesting because of exactly what you said. Morgan Moses has been out there every day, but I think lately we've seen less and less of him in the actual team reps. Today, when they were doing the walkthrough stuff, it was a lot of rotation between Jacobs and Bryant, the rookie, who I love the phrase that Evan has for me, a toolsy rookie, because he does have all the measurables. I think you'll see a lot of those two guys on Wednesday, and I think there might be an opportunity for a swing tackle if one of these guys can show that they can play both sides. We haven't really gotten to see Vidarian Lowe. I would expect him to be into that competition as well. So good opportunity for those guys, two young guys, Jacobs and Bryant.
You talked a little bit about the wide receiver position. I just want to hammer down on that a little bit because it seems kind of obvious who the top five guys are maybe right now at this point. But when you get into the second-year guys, the rookies, that's where it seems like the opportunities are going to be, not only Wednesday in joint practices, but into Friday night.
Yeah, a lot of teams nowadays carrying 6 receivers on their 53-man roster. And so who has the inside track right now? I feel like it's Javon Baker based off of what we've seen in the last couple of days. But does that hold? Does Efton Chisholm come into this conversation? Does Jalen Polk come into the conversation? We know Kendrick Bourne's probably not going to be out there with the injury he's dealing with. So that's a name that we're not necessarily going to see. But between that group that I just named right there, they all feel like they're probably competing for one spot. It's a lot of guys to compete for one spot. So what direction do they want to go in? I think will probably come down to skill set. Do they want to have a bigger bodied X receiver like a Javon Baker? Do they want to go with the prototypical slot like Efton Chisholm? And which direction does that end up going in? We'll see. But I'm just fascinated to see who catches passes from Drake. Like, that's always the big thing in these practices. If you are catching passes with Drake Maye and you're running routes with Diggs and Kyle Williams and Pop Douglas and Booty, they probably have a plan for you to be around. So we'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah, Paul, I don't know if we're going to see Terry McLaurin. It's definitely not in the game, probably Friday night, probably not on Wednesday either, but I want to highlight
maybe in a Patriots uniform.
maybe in a Patriots uniform. We don't know about that, but I want to highlight the cornerback position, which Christian Gonzalez has now been out for a week. We're not expecting to see Carlton Davis. A lot of opportunity at that position. right from the get-go. You're going to start with, DJ James, who had a good day yesterday. Alex Austin has kind of been their stalwart out there, but it's going to mean opportunities for guys like Kobe Minor, go right down the list, including that injury yesterday to Marcellus Dial.
Yeah,
which,
I think that has a potential impact. I think he was taking some reps in the slot, behind Marcus Jones. So I think that job is probably still open. They probably want somebody that they feel good about playing inside, other than Marcus Jones. Maybe Isaiah Bolden gets some more opportunities to do some of that stuff. We've seen him sort of move around a little bit in the secondary, seen him in the back end, even at times. But yeah, DJ James would seem to be a guy. He was getting some of the reps today in the walkthrough. Behind those other three guys that you already mentioned. Kobe Minor's a guy I noticed really for the first time on Monday. Sort of been around the ball a little bit, celebrating some pass defenses. So maybe he's starting to get his feet wet a little bit. One of the late round draft picks in this class. So opportunities definitely, for sure. Some of those younger secondary corners, it might be one job. And right, DJ James certainly gotten a lot of reps in those spots, but I don't think it's a done deal by any means.
Yeah, it's a fun conversation because I think in Washington they're talking about the receiver position behind Terry McLaurin and are worried that they don't have a lot of depth at receiver. So now with the Patriots corners, we're talking about their depth corners because of the injuries to Gonzalez and Davis. So it's a fun little matchup there of two groups that are going to be really competing to earn roles and to earn roster spots on both sides of the ball. So we've heard a lot about Deebo Samuel and the shape that he's in right now and whether or not he has anything left. But behind that, it's not a lot right there in Washington of household names besides Deebo and McLaurin. So I'm interested to see what that group looks like.
Yeah, last point I want to talk about is just Drake Maye, the quarterback. For me, I'm looking at the last couple practices. We've started to implement some situational football, end of minute, 2-minute situation. We saw them walking through that today. Anticipation is, based on the joint practices we've seen in the past, that they'll have at the end of the game, at the end of practice, probably a one possession kind of thing, got to have it moment. And guys, for me, for Drake, he's looked really good early on in a lot of these practices. He looks comfortable in 7-on-7, but I've found that as we've gotten into the more competitive periods, he hasn't quite been able to stick that dagger in that we're really looking for. Going back to the interception that we ended off the in-stadium practice, and I know we're questionable on that touchdown yesterday that they ended the game, but still it was kind of, as Evan put it, I think kind of a heave, kind of a lucky, it wasn't, maybe they finished with a touchdown, but still, I want to see Drake Maye in this joint practice be on the ball and be really tight in these
If you're looking for the number one thing that I would be paying attention to, it's a combination of what both of you guys have talked about. You talking specifically about Maye and Evan bringing up the receivers that are actually catching passes from Maye, some of those secondary targets. So those are would be probably first and foremost. I want to see some consistency on offense. The pass protection, I don't think, has been really good throughout the summer. I'd like to see that be better. We all remember what happened last year against Philly, so I want to see a dramatic improvement in that department. And I'd like to see which of these receivers that Evan talked about already starts to emerge. So let's say I get an opportunity. There's 4 of us for one job. I'm going to take the step forward, and I'm going to emerge as the leading candidate in absolutely Drake Maye. It starts with Drake Maye and his consistency.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like in these practices we see some really high-end flashes from Drake Maye, dropping throws in the bucket and making some real highlight reel passes, but at the same time the consistency of being able to string plays together to drive the ball down the field hasn't necessarily been there, and that's, unfortunately, for better or worse, that's kind of like his MO right now as a whole, even going back to North Carolina, where you have 4 or 5 plays a game that make your jaw drop, but can he consistently put it together late in games especially will be the question. But you mentioned the offensive line. We got to talk about it a little bit. On the left side, Will Campbell and Jared Wilson against this Commanders defensive line. Yeah, Von Miller's over there now, Javon Kinlaw, Deron Payne, Dorrance Armstrong, old friend Dietrich Wise. They do have some rushers up front that can get after the quarterback. Newton, second-round pick last year, another guy. So it's more, I would say, their strength in Washington's the interior defensive line, not necessarily the edge positions, which is why they brought in Von Miller. But still, you want to see, especially those 2 rookies, Wilson and Will Campbell, hold up in this practice tomorrow and face some different matchups, different body types. You don't necessarily have the tells and you don't know them as well as your own teammates. So let's see how it looks.
Yeah, well, a lot to watch tomorrow during joint practices. If you're able to make it down here to Foxborough, it's a great take. If not, we'll be live on the air with Patriots Unfiltered as practice starts off to set the scene for you. And then, of course, we'll be back after practice with a full Patriots training camp cast, recapping everything that went down at joint practices. We'll see you then.